Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ful-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. I'm your host, Ash Woolford. Joining me today are the two Jacks. Mozza, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, ho-hum, but all right. How you guys doing?
Completely get that feeling, mate. And AJ, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, that's about all I can say. just yeah.
Yeah. We're here obviously to talk about the Brighton game yesterday. A frustrating game overall. Frustrating because, when you let a game go like that in the last minute, like we've done a few times this season, it's extremely frustrating. But for me, the performance was really lackluster. There's a lot of things that we need to talk about that happened during the game that were probably self-inflicted accidents and injuries and moments that happen that we need to sort of get over, especially if we have any real aspirations of actually making it into Europe this season. We keep doing this where every single time we all go, we have a real good chance to make it to Europe. We just throw an absolute bomb like this. And yesterday's result, yes, it stings maybe more because it happened in the last minute that we lost the game, but that whole second half was a bit tedious to watch, and it wasn't great. It wasn't great from a Fulham perspective, and we'll talk about that as we go along. Jack, we'll start. AJ, we'll start with you, mate. But it's the same question I ask you every single week, especially when we look at this. You look at that starting lineup on Saturday. There's no real shocks in terms of going back to five at the back. We did sort of, I know Drew briefly sort of mentioned we might possibly do it in the pre-match, and we weren't all shocked that it happened, especially with no Sasha Lukic in the team. Was there any real surprises for you in that starting lineup, or was it sort of just, sort of what we had available to us?
Yeah, the formation was half expected. The formation with the personnel that would have been better suited to a 4-3-3 shot the living shite out of me. Andres Pereira and ESR cannot play together in a five at the back system with two in midfield. Between the two of them, they don't even have the work rate combined of Lukic. As much as Andreas does very kindly try to put in a shift, he just hasn't got the defensive mindset in order to do what Lukic does. And ESR adds absolutely nothing to what Andreas does, so it makes no odds. Outside of that, the rest of the formation was fine. Harrison Reed probably should have started the game, in my opinion, or Tom Kearney, someone that's got a half inclination of naturally controlling the midfield and knowing how to play as a central midfielder. Outside of that, I don't think there's too many surprises. Maybe we would have liked to have seen Sessegnon get the nod, but is what it is.
Yeah, when we look at that first half of football, before we sort of get to the Fulham first goal, the first half an hour was very open. It was a very open game of football. If you're a neutral watching that game, you probably would have really enjoyed it because it was very like end to end, and there was a few chances on either side, but no real, no real danger. We even though Brighton had most of the ball, we looked like we had more of the chances, but like our natural problem seems to be every single week we talk about this, where we have this ability of getting to the edge of the box, and then as soon as we get there, we just look a bit more confused. It's one of my biggest problems I have with VSR, especially in games where we're not winning in, that sometimes his work rate up to the edge of the box is just like it's non-existent, and it's a bit frustrating to watch. I don't want to single him out though and say that he's the reason why we didn't win yesterday, because he's by far not the worst performer in the team yesterday, but it was just one of those really frustrating opening half an hours. Mozza, we go into the 35th minute and probably our first bit of real open, expansive play. The lovely ball out to Iwobi, who's run with the ball for 50, 60 yards. Beautiful run by Alex Iwobi, who probably realistically in the first 34 minutes before it had happened not really had a great game, but really lung busting run, great cross in. A lovely finish by Raul Jimenez, really turning back the clock for Raul. What did you think of the goal?
Yeah, I agree with you completely on turning back the clock on Raul, the way he finished it. So much so to the point where I was watching it with good old mother again. No euphemism, literally my mum. And we were going, is he actually left-footed? Can't remember. yeah, we had to do a bit of research and go, yeah, was that his go-to foot sort of thing? But yeah, I thought he finished it great. You know, chest to great control, half volley. I do disagree with you though, Ash, on what you just said about Iwobi not having a great first 34 minutes before that. Because for me, I felt like he was the only one who was showing some legs. Really, you know, it's all very well being quick and that, but I thought he was very good at trying to, yeah, as he usually does, run the ball down the wings, and frustratingly so, he did do some awful crosses. And again, it was a thing for me where I was like, can we just, you know, get the ball on the floor and not just try and pick out hit it and hope, you know, pick out someone to be there. But then I had to sort of eat my words because it did work for that one goal. And as far as I can remember, the one shot on target that we had in that half. So, yeah, a bit of humble pie I had to eat. But yeah, I thought Iwobi was the one actually like doing all right, especially in that first half. And just going back what you were saying about ESR as well. Yeah, I don't want to knock him too much or knock his talent. But if you compare him to the likes of Iwobi, two very different players, I've both obviously have the old Arsenal connection in common from their past. But he hasn't got the legs compared to Iwobi. I think he's good at finding space and picking out the passes, but I don't know if that left side is the best position for him. I think ESR is probably better suited, being more of a central player, but what do I know? Remains to be seen. I don't know up until that goal, though, if the formation was right for us. And I say this because I don't know. I don't know what the alternative was really, given the players that we had available. I would have preferred Sessegnon on the start as well, but it seemed to take us a good 15, 20 minutes, in my opinion, for us to actually get into a groove, though, or find out what to do. We were sitting back a lot, but I thought, right, are we just going to let Brighton go guns blazing and then sort of counter-attack them, which is, I think, the tactic that was deployed, but ultimately not overly successfully.
Yeah, I know I'm being a bit harsh on Alex Iwobi. For me, you know, we all know naturally we don't really want to see him out on that right hand side. He plays a lot better on the left, I think, personally. I believe so anyway. You know, and for me, I never knock his work rate. But that's the one thing, the big difference between him and ESR for me is that even when he's having a bad game, or you know, he's having one of those games where you know all the little touches don't quite come off, or you know, every time he tries to control it, he sort of miscontrols it a little bit. He doesn't give up, and the work rate always remains there. And that's the one thing I'll never knock Alex Iwobi for, because you know, even in the Wolves game the week beforehand, he had a couple of those moments where, you know, when he came on, he had a couple of like weak touches, and again at Old Trafford, he had a couple of moments like that too. But it never stopped his work rate around it. Whereas ESR, if he has one bad moment in a game where he miscontrols the ball once, his head drops for like 10 minutes, and then you almost need someone like to kick him out the backside and be like, "Look, just get back in the game." I think the thing with ESR is we say it as jokingly half the time, but you know, we need to knock the Arsenal out of him a little bit. You know, we need someone there just to go. You know, you haven't got 10 other world class players behind you to rely on for you. Like, it's all right being the youngster at Arsenal when you know there's a 250 million pound midfield and a 300 million pound defense behind you. You can't do that here. You have to, you know, keep your head up, and you're gonna lose the ball. There's gonna be moments in the game that don't go your way, but you just need to keep playing. And I think with ESR, I think half of his issue with us this year is definitely a confidence issue with him. You know, at the moment, I'm struggling to see where that 35 million pounds gone. And there's a player there. We see it every now and then. There's always glimpses, but it just, I don't know. It maybe just needs a little bit more mollycoddling, a little bit more time to sort of adapt to being at Fulham and not Arsenal to realise it. But you know, that is what that is. That we don't hold on to the lead for very long. Very, very frustratingly, concede yet another goal because of lapses in our defence and concentration. Van Heck gets up, and beautiful header, by the way, by Van Heck, and puts it in back off the back post. there's some slight contention. If maybe there was a slight offside with Hinchelwood being offside as the ball's played across and stepping in front of Bassi and stopping him getting back to mark the man who then headers and was the goal. But it's minimal. It's tight, but it is offside when you look at it. But I'm not going to blame the offside for the fact we conceded. I'm going to blame our poor defending for the fact that we conceded here. AJ, we go in at half time 1-1 after conceding that goal. Really frustrating sort of end to that half. What were your thoughts at half time? Because I wasn't in a very positive mood at half time after conceding that goal.
I think you're all being very kind so far in regards to the performance from that first half. And spoiler alert to what Mozza said earlier about that our first shot on target in the first half. It was our only shot on target all game. So I think that sums that up enough. We'll get into that as we get into the full-time thoughts. In regards to that first half, I just thought it was abysmal. We completely lost out on the midfield. We weren't showing up enough for the ball. We weren't winning any second balls. We were just on the back foot the entire time, as if we were playing a Man City or something along those lines. We gave Brighton way too much respect on the ball, and any other side would have punished us a lot earlier than what Brighton did. There will be contention because their goals came from a seemingly offside, and later on granted, in my opinion, a warranted penalty, but we'll get into that later. But because it's a penalty and because it's a free kick and then an offside from the free kick, there will be contention in some fans saying, "Oh, we were unlucky." No, we weren't unlucky. We were abysmal, frankly, in my opinion. The only goal and clear-cut opportunity came from the one time that we were very direct in our approach, and we had a Iwobi just go, "Spot it, I'm a run." And that's when he got behind the defenders. Once he was behind the defenders, he can deliver a ball in behind the defenders. And guess who's there doing his job as a striker behind the defenders? Raul Jimenez. Brilliant bit of football, brilliant bit of play. And it's the only brilliant bit of play that we had for 90 minutes, frankly. And that was my thoughts at halftime, at least. And we'll go into the rest of it in a minute.
Well, let's just look. Nothing happens in the second half. The second half is all Brighton. We're basically just defending. And we do so, I think, quite well, quite resolutely. You know, we are holding on quite well defensively as much as the rest of the pitch is on. There are a couple of questions I'll have about a few things after about the game in a minute once we just sort of wrap it up. The penalty incident, we have to talk about it because I've seen quite a lot today of a lot of people jumping on Harrison Reed like he's made the worst mistake ever made. It's annoying. It's frustrating. It's one of those penalties that I really hate seeing being given because all the strikers try to do is get his foot in front of the defender so he gets clipped and he can go down. But it's a penalty. It's a penalty. There's no arguments to whether or not it's a penalty. It's a penalty. The only argument there is it's why Harrison Reed isn't switched on enough to realise the player's there and not to do it. You know, for me, Harrison he's probably hindered by the fact he's not had a lot of game time. And sometimes these things take, you know, a lot of match sharpness, and he'd very easily not have match sharpness. He's not played anywhere near enough minutes to be switched on as he should be in that moment. That's me trying to just deflect a little bit because I've seen him getting some pelters today, and I don't think it's greatly fair that that's happened. You know, Brighton obviously then score their penalty, which was awarded in the 96th minute when there's only 5 minutes added on. But you know, that's another thing that frustrates me. Not even that the penalty was given a minute after full time should have been blown up. It's the fact that we don't stay switched on yet again, and that would be my complaint there. You know, I had a few Brighton fans yesterday jump on me when I tweeted about it because they thought I was arguing the case of the penalty, and I wasn't. I was arguing the mentality of our players because we've done it too many times this season where we've given up last minute goals or last minute chances that we shouldn't do. You know, we got away with one last week at Man United when Leno made probably one of the best saves we've seen this season in the last minute. And you know, today, even yesterday, he got close to the penalty that was taken. If he'd saved it, it would have been unfair. And it's one of those things that we've now played Brighton 8 times in the Premier League, and we've rode our luck almost every single time we played them, and we've got 3 or 4 wins now against them that we probably didn't deserve. And it's probably about time they got one over on us. And I think that's as simple as that. I don't think there's much more to add to it about the game. I've got a couple of questions though for you both. And AJ, I'm going to come to you with this one because it's something that we have discussed in the past. Was yesterday a real sign of why we should have brought more players in January? You know, one of the things I noticed yesterday is as the game was going along, we looked like we were tiring, and Brighton were taking more and more control of the game. And then they managed to bring on, you know, Danny Welbeck, and they had subs that strengthened them, whereas we had nobody available on the bench to arguably made the team stronger than it already was on the pitch. We had a few like for like subs, but you know, was yesterday an argument that if we do have a real chance of making it in Europe this year, then we really should have maybe brought in a few more heads during January?
Hindsight's a beautiful thing, but no one during the transfer window, at least to my knowledge, was screaming for another central midfielder. And that's what we were lacking during this game. Hindsight suggests that that Lukic was always going to end up getting that 2-game suspension, and we've got to be prepared for it. That is something we clearly weren't prepared for, and thus were reactionary after quite a big cup game, which again, in hindsight, we might not have considered that we were still going to be in. So all of these things add up. So as much as I'd love to sit here and say, yeah, we really should have bought more players in the transfer market, what we would have done might have helped us against Brighton in buying another right back so that Cassagna can rest, in buying an extra winger and maybe an extra striker so that we've got some extra firepower. But that game on yesterday, on Saturday, as it were, when this goes out on Monday, that game on Saturday was lost in midfield. And it wasn't changed for the full 90 minutes, despite losing that battle in midfield throughout the entirety of the game. So for me, it's one of those, yes, having extra players would have helped us a lot, especially in games where we've lacked firepower, not in this game specifically. This game specifically had nothing to do with the personnel that we bought or didn't buy, but just unfortunately the injuries and suspensions related to our midfield.
Yeah, and I it's a bit of a difficult one, isn't it? Because you know, we I think everyone in the fan base particularly was calling out for another right back and another winger. We're in this really weird position where we have 2, I think, quite capable right backs, and we're just unlucky that the most capable one is out injured. He's been out injured for a long time. And the other right back, who is a decent right back, has now had such a long string of games with no break that he's starting to make little mistakes that because he's tired, he needs a break. And we've got no cover there. We don't have any natural cover there. It's not even like we have a youth player that can come in and, you know, play the last 15, 20 minutes of a game. Like, it's not working, and he needs a break. And, you know, I have been very keen, especially when talking about Timothy Castagne, not to jump in his performances too much, because he must be shattered, man. I think there's any player in that team who needs a break. He's the only one who hasn't. Even in you know, the Wigan Cup game, he had to play. In the Watford Cup game, he had to play. And every other player's had at least 1 or 2 games where they've been rested, and he hasn't. So, you know, it's frustrating there. I think for me, on Saturday, one of the biggest issues was the bench looked weak. Not in the sense of I don't like the players that are on the bench, because I love every single one of those players that are on the bench, especially the youth players. I think they're all dangerous for what they do. But the subs Marco makes seem to always be too late or way after they should have been done. You know, you look at the game on Saturday, you know, we didn't make the first substitution until the 69th minute, and that was the obligatory Rodrigo Muniz swapping over for Raul, because they always do, and that doesn't really change our style of play at all whenever we do it. And then you look at the next subs were made in the 82nd minute when we bring on 36-year-old Willian and Harrison Reed, who don't change any way our formation is. You know, it just, we're playing like for like, and it goes and does what it is. And then it's not until the 89th minute when we take Iwobi off and bring Sessignon on that maybe the formation changes slightly, and that's only because we become way more defensive trying to see the game out. And then obviously we give a penalty away. Mozza, I get really frustrated at Marco Silva's substitutions, mainly because I don't think he's proactive enough in them. And I know we all love Marco Silva, and in Marco we trust, and we say it all the time, and I definitely agree with it. Do you just wish he was a bit more proactive with substitutions and formation changes in games? Because on Saturday it was clear something needed to change, and it just didn't. And then it got to the point where we were holding on, and then ultimately we didn't.
Yeah, well, we know that he favours a late substitution. I think we've only had 2 games in the league where he's made changes at half time. Yeah, I think we've talked about it before as well, where we've said, is there like an average sort of timestamp on a game? But it tends to be around 65 minutes if we're lucky, usually 70. I appreciate that one you mentioned was at 69 minutes, the Muniz swap. Yeah, I mean, pointless, really. But I think the next ones that came along were about 80 minutes or 79 minutes. And I thought, as I've just said, I know Marco likes a late substitution, but that was just far too late in the game for me. And this, what I'm about to say, feel free to come to my house and put a nail gun through the back of my knee when I'm sleeping, because there's a comparison here, I think, with how Gareth Southgate ran the England sides. Like, he wouldn't make subs at half time, rarely ever. He would leave them late on in the game. That's the only comparison I'm going to make between those two, by the way. But that's just what it reminds me of. But, you know, watching England, that was very frustrating. And I feel like I would be in the vast majority of people who felt that way when Southgate did subs. I feel like I'm in the vast majority of people that feel the same way how late Marco leaves his subs. But, yeah, too little, too late. That's the only way I can sum it up. And they probably weren't really, to use the word dangerous enough, exciting enough to inject any sort of sense of urgency into the game at that point. So I can't get my head around the decision making for those. But I thought if you want to really like spice it up, as we said in our preview game, get Sess on ASAP. I wish he started. Get Godot on. Get King on. You know, those are the ones, because especially the last two, where they're trying to like sort of prove themselves and make a name for themselves. They're going to be really giving it their all. I'm not saying Willian and the others who came on aren't. But yeah, I think I probably would have preferred to see Kearney come on in place of Pereira, because I think he could have done better in the midfield and strengthened it alongside Berge. But I guess, yeah, if you know my thoughts on Tom Kearney, and I know I make fun. Well, I don't make fun of him, but whatever. I'm not like his biggest fan when it comes to his footballing ability. But when
you love him, but he's past his heyday.
When the likes of me are saying, "Oh, please bring on Tom Kearney," you know, shit's gone awry. So, yeah.
Well, I think for me, where the game was lost ultimately on Saturday wasn't the 96th minute penalty. It was in the 75th minute when we were clearly lagging and we needed fresh legs and we needed changing. You know, Brighton become really proactive and they bring on Gomez, Solly March, and Danny Welbeck, and then we wait 5 minutes and bring on 36-year-old Willian and Reed. Just you know, you're not allowed to just say Willian. It's 36-year-old Willian. You know this. It's the rules.
Yeah, we've got. But that'll be the next T-shirt. 36-year-old Willian.
yeah. Like it's frustrating, right? And I don't know if you agree, AJ, but it's one of those things where, yes, we know we're a few injuries and we're down, and because of that, there's a couple of squad members missing. But when you look at that bench on Saturday, and you look at the fact that we have Tom Kearney on there, we have King, we have Sess, we have Godot, right? And you're losing the midfield battle, and you're not creating anything attacking-wise after that 75th minute. And then Brighton make those subs that they bring on, you know, arguably three of their best players. You've got to go, we probably need to make a change. and the changes he makes are not only like for like, but they're for players that are slower than the players that are already on the pitch, and you're not going to be able to break with that, and it's frustrating. I don't know if you agree, AJ.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to highlight. And the first is regarding the substitutions. They all seem like they're pre-planned and arranged. None of them ever seem reactionary or tactical. They seem to be like, okay, lads, here's the lineup. Oh, Rodrigo, you're not starting today, but don't worry, you're going to come on the 60th minute when we get a break in play. Willian, you're still getting up to match fitness. We'll bring you on about the 80th. Seth, we'll give you some minutes at the end, mate. Don't worry, you will get on the pitch. Like, it all seems prearranged. There's like there was a game, I think it was last season against Newcastle, where there was a water break, and the entire water break, or it was an injury to the goalkeeper or something, and that entire time it was Eddie Howe rejigging the entire lineup, changing the formation, changing the way the personnel worked, and it ultimately worked for them. And we were sat there slating it after the game because it seemed like really dirty, underhanded tactics to use a water break or a fake injury for those sort of things. I'm not suggesting that we do anything like that, but I'm suggesting that we use substitutes as a means of being tactically aware and changing things where we needed to. We go into 1-1, we start lagging at the 60th minute, 60, 70th minute. At that point, if we make, say, 2 substitutions there and bring on, say, Godot and Sessegnon, and we go to a 4-2-3-1, suddenly the whole game's changed because we're in a much more compact formation that will allow us to control the ball. We now have either 3 or 5 players in the midfield at any one time. We no longer lose that battle in the midfield. Like, I'm obviously not telling Marco Silva how to suck eggs. No one here is going to do that. We love him and he's fucking genius, but we do need to start seeing some sort of tactical development from him when these changes happen. I cannot for the life of me remember a game where we made a genuine tactical substitution that wasn't forced, where we changed formation or we changed the style of play or we swapped wing backs or wingers or brought on a second striker to partner one up top or moved to a pivoting pair of central midfielders with an out-and-out number 10. It's whatever we start with is what we finish with, which can be really detrimental if, one, the opposition has planned to play against that, or two, throughout the game, they've clocked on and are already dominating us at that point. Because we have to rely on just being the better team, which on paper in some of these fixtures we're not going to be, and we have to be clever about it. And sometimes we just aren't. And maybe that's the one straw in Marco Silva's bow that he's missing from being Manchester City or Bayern Munich or Juventus manager. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's why he's the Fulham manager, because he's not that tactically aware during match days. Maybe he's old school. He likes to set his players up, and then when they're on the pitch, leave them to it. But the way he acts on the touchline suggests that isn't the case. So swings and roundabouts. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with an awful lot. I think for me, it's just not proactive enough, and it's too many times this season where you look at West Ham at home, Southampton at home, Ipswich at home. They're just the home games where we've done it. West Ham away, it was just a shit show from start to finish. But there's been too many games this season where we've let leads slip in the last minutes, or we've needed something in the last minutes and not creating anything. I think an awful lot of that is papered over by the fact that the one time he did make a proactive change and he brought Harry Wilson on against Brentford, and we scored 2 goals in injury time to get a draw and then win the game, sort of papers over the fact that there's been 15 other times this season when he's not done something like that, and he probably should do. And I know that we struggle because we have 2 strikers that are pretty much like playing the same position, which is why we can't put them both on the pitch at the same time, because they just try to cover the same space. And we've seen that multiple times this season where that happens. We have not got the greatest amount of cover on the wing, especially now Adama's out injured. Hopefully, he'll be back next week and it's not so much of a problem. But to not be prepared for Sasha Lukic getting a ban seems a bit worrying to me. And it's frustrating. I think this is what it ultimately boils down to. We go away from the game on Saturday, and my frustrations of the loss aren't in the individual loss against Brighton. It's the frustration of when will we learn? When will we learn that we need to change things up sometimes in order to be proactive in a game? And when we're being pegged back in the 70th minute, you can't just sit there and go, I'm going to make 3 like-for-like subs and it's going to change, because it won't. It will not, unless you're being proactive and you're the one trying to change it. And on Saturday, we didn't make the changes. Brighton made 3 changes, which ultimately made them stronger, not weaker. And we only had subs on the bench that would have made us weaker. As much as I would have loved to have seen Goddo and King come on, they don't make us stronger. They're players that we can only really afford to pay on the luxury at the moment, because we're trying to bed them in to become Premier League players, and you don't want to put them in when you're battling for a game. But arguing that case, we've got 2 players who started the game on Saturday that are in the exact same position. We've had this same discussion about Andreas Pereira and Emma Smith-Rowe. We have it all the time, right? Where Emma Smith-Rowe is a lovely player as long as you're 1-0 up. As soon as you go a goal down or something negative happens in the game, he disappears. He turns into Casper the Ghost. He disappears, right? Because he just doesn't have the fight in him. He just doesn't have that fight yet, and he needs to get that little bit of fire in his belly. And I know he's a nice guy, and he's a lovely guy, and none of us want to lose that, right? But we need it. We need to just find that little bit of grit. That when he needs to find it, he needs to find it. Andreas Pereira has that. He has moments in games where he can find that, but on Saturday, he's been asked to cover a position which isn't really his best position to cover, which is fair enough. And again, I wouldn't knock his effort, but we can't play those 2 players together and expect the worlds to change unless we get a 2-goal lead. It just makes us look weaker. Lads, let's close this one up as we always do. Man of the matches. I know it's not the easiest thing to do when we lose a game, but we will do it. AJ, I'm going to come to you first, mate. Can I have your honourable mentions and man of the match for the game on Saturday, please?
Oh fuck.
Don't know why that tickled me. Sorry. I feel your pain.
Sander Berge for trying to do 3 men's job at once. That's all I got. That's all I've got.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to argue with that, really. Mozza, what about yourself?
Already mentioned him. I'm going to say Iwobi, if only for the assist. I thought Rail had a good work rate, but maybe he wasn't given enough service. I don't know. You can argue about it, but there was only that 1 shot on target for the whole game, as AJ mentioned. And yeah, Berge as well would be an honourable mention for me.
Yeah, for me, I think they're the only 3 players that really I can say much about. Iwobi's run to set up the goal was outstanding. Again, I know he had a bit of a sticky opening bit patch, but again, as I said already, I won't ever knock his effort. He always tries to, if he has a bad moment, he always tries to make up for it in the effort that he puts in afterwards, which is one of the reasons why I love him as much as I do as a player, because we love those players at Fulham. You don't necessarily have to be the best, but the work rate has to be there. Jimenez's goal is outstanding. He takes it well, and that alone deserves a mention. But for me, it's got to be Sander Berge, because yes, he was covering 3 people's positions on Saturday, and he had again his work rate was outstanding. So for me, it can only really be Sander Berge, and I think that's where we have to leave it. Lads, thank you very much for joining me for this. I know it's never easy doing these after we've lost a game, especially in the spirit and the nature that we lost this one. Again, I think we're all in agreement. The frustrations on Saturday aren't necessarily from Saturday. It's just the insanity of the fact that we've done the same thing again, of just not paying attention for 90 minutes. Thank you very much, everyone who's joined us for this one. Again, I know it's probably not an easy one. If you have any sort of comments or anything on the game, let us know, anything you noticed during the game that we should be worried about, or we should at least take some positives about. Let us know. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Tell your Fulham mates about us. It is great that we can get as many people to join as possible. Other than that, we will see you all on Friday for our Spurs preview. God help us. Have a good week, and come on, you Whites.